Just at the end of order. Oh, I got it right here. From 2019. 5/20. Your pens and your losing them. It's okay because I have backups.
I feel like I've lost a whole package of it.
I have backups for you. That's good. I don't think I gave you a whole pack.
Because I was like, I'm losing all of my stuff.
I'm sorry to give you more work.
What type of tea are you looking for? I was about to ask. They're not looking. You wear them all the time. Not so much. I thought about it. Like,
Still, I don't want to get good bathing suits. And I'm sitting texting your flower.
That is a great story. That is.
Ain't that a hot mess? Oh, I made sure. Raise my voice level.
I'm sorry. I'm terrible at forgetting to get it. We'll start with one.
We are back on the record. At this time, I ask the members of the board hearing panel to state their names.
Melissa King.
Sandra Culpepper.
Carly Walker. And now I will announce the board's decision in case number 2019-0419 involving licensee Amy Spall Jordan, license P-333857. The board's decision is as follows. The board finds the licensee guilty as charged. The discipline imposed is a restricted license. So the restrictions imposed are a formal reprimand, $500 fine, single state license, the evaluations. A board approved assessor. You should undergo a chemical evaluation, chemical dependency evaluation, and a psychiatric, psychological evaluation, which must be completed within a certain time period after you receive your order. You have a time period to complete those evaluations, and the board ruled to follow the assessor's recommendations. So that is the discipline imposed. So the restricted license, you know, like I said, is subject, the time period for the restrictions is subject to the board approved assessor's recommendations, or 12 months, whichever is greater. So the board is saying 12 months restricted license unless the board approved assessor recommends something greater than that. So that's the nature of the discipline imposed. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
So I have no restriction as far as practicing in Mississippi. I'm confused. It's just that I'll have that on my license where it's a single state and I have to go through the evaluations.
Yes, and then let's say, you know, we don't know what the assessor's recommendations are going to be, but once you receive those, the board is saying that the restrictions imposed on your license, like the single state requirement, and any other recommendations related to your nursing license as provided by the board assessors, that's your discipline. And so once the assessor's recommendation comes back and says, you know, I don't want to say what they could possibly say, but their recommendations will be included in their report. And the board is saying that its discipline is to adopt those recommendations, especially if they're greater than a 12-month restricted license. So the assessor may recommend 24 months, whereas, so then that would be the restricted time period covering your license. It would then at that time be, you know, 24 months, because that's the assessor's recommendations. But let's just say the assessor recommends just that 12 months that the board is willing to impose. It sort of agrees with that, then the restrictions will last for that 12-month period. You can ask any questions, yeah.
So I lose my multi-state license and
That's correct.
the
For-
fine and the assessment, and that's. Okay. If the recommendation is under 3 months, will that change your guys' mind, or is it gonna be automatically?
The,
4 months?
the,
If they say that they don't believe I need to be restricted.
no, so it's 12 months, a minimum,
Okay,
a minimum of 12 months. And then if the assessor agrees with that, then it'll just be restricted for 12 months. If the assessor disagrees and recommends 24 months, 36 months, you know, then that's what the discipline will be. That will be your time period for the restrictions on your license,
Okay.
single state provisions. And there may be added additional things like maybe employer reports or quarterly reports, you know. It's just those things will depend on, or drug screens, those that all will depend on the assessor's recommendation.
assessor, okay. Yeah, like, will the assessor, do we have to come to Jackson, or is there one down on the coast, like?
Now,
The
then,
compliance officer
Yeah.
has a list.
The final order will contain everything that you're asking right now, and nothing takes effect till that final order is sent to you. And then you'll have a compliance case manager that will walk you through each step of that order to make sure you know how to get those. There's a board approved list of assessors that's on the board's website,
Okay, so,
but she'll answer all of those questions for you
okay,
after the final order is issued.
okay, okay. Okay, that makes sense. I already asked that. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that changes my license. I can perform all my duties, correct? Like, there's no restriction on my, on my duties, correct?
oh, yes, that is that terminology, that word restricted, like, I guess, without the discipline, you're sort of free to use your license as, per regulations, but the restrictions is that, you know, you're subject to, having to go, get evaluated, you know,
Okay,
so it's restricted in that way. That
Oh.
makes sense. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
okay, okay.
Any other questions?
Humble trap.
No.
For 12 months.
Well, thank you. This concludes the hearing in case number 2019-0419.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we, the fine, do we wait till we get the order or can you pay it?
Yes,
You have to wait till you get the order. Everything waits till you get the order.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. You're welcome. Thanks.
Clerks are ready to proceed. Begin with the next matter on the docket, case number 2018-1223. The licensee is Ms. Gwendolyn Woodland, license number R-689882NP. I am Kristen Love, and I will serve as the hearing officer in this matter today. My role during the course of this proceeding will be to rule on objections to questions or evidence raised by the parties, to see to the orderly process of the proceedings, and to ensure that the proceedings are conducted in accordance with the applicable laws and rules. At this time, I ask the members of the board hearing panel to introduce themselves for the record. Is she coming? All right, I believe we need to take a 5-minute recess. We'll return at 10:35. All right, we are back on the record. We called up the second matter on today's docket, case number 2018-1223. And before we went in recess, I asked the members of the board hearing panel to introduce themselves for the record. So now we will begin there.
Janie Clanton, Orion.
Dr. Melissa King, nurse practitioner.
Walker, LPN.
And will the attorney represent the board state your name for the record?
Ian Salzman.
And is the licensee Ms. Woodland present?
Yes,
And Ms. Woodland, are you represented by counsel?
no,
Because you're not represented by counsel, I have a few questions for you. Do you understand you have the right to an attorney to represent you in this matter?
yes,
And do you understand you have the right to have witnesses testify on your behalf?
yes,
And do you understand you have the right to have subpoenas issued by this board on your behalf?
yes,
And do you understand the nature of the charges pending against you such that the outcome of this hearing could be revocation of your nursing license?
yes,
And understanding all of this, you wish to proceed without counsel representation?
yes.
Can I ask, any individuals in attendance that will give testimony to state your name for the record?
I'm Dr. Charmaine McCleve,
Can you please spell your name?
CAJRMAINE.
Thank you. Any other?
Yes.
Yes.
MCCLEAVE.
Thank you.
Lloyd Wiley.
I'm sorry, Miss Woodland, are you gonna testify today?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so the court reporter is about to swear you all in. She asked that you raise your right hand.
Solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes,
Are there any preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. We would ask that exhibits B1 through B10 be admitted into evidence. And I believe Mrs. Woodland also yesterday submitted R1. And I assume she would want that also admitted into evidence today.
So Ms. Woodland, do you have any objection to the admission of the board counsel's exhibits into today's record?
what I submitted yesterday?
No, not what you submitted, what the board counsel is attempting to submit now. Those exhibits, do you have a copy of it?
I got a copy of a lot of stuff.
Okay,
I'm not sure exactly. Is that what they gave me?
so those the board's exhibits. Did you receive a copy of
Uh,
it?
I got a lot.
Okay, you can take a minute to review them and then let me know if you have any
I
objections.
looked at it. I don't have any questions.
Or do you have any objection to them being admitted into the record?
No.
All right, so those records are admitted. And so I understand that you have an exhibit. So Ms. Salzman, do you have any objection to the exhibits proposed by the respondent?
No, Your Honor, I just have a secondary matter I'd like to, a secondary preliminary matter that I'd like to bring up in a moment.
So those respondents composite exhibit is admitted into today's record. Any other preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Woodland subpoenaed 2 individuals. One was Dr. McLeod, who's present today. And she also subpoenaed Penny Jemison, and you'll see that subpoena on page 33, 34. We have not been able to get certified mail on her. She was given the opportunity, obviously, for us to send it via certified mail or for her to have a return of service and the process server make that service. So we did get service of process on Dr. McLeod, who's present today, but since Ms. Woodland has requested a second witness who is not present, I didn't know if Ms. Woodland wants to go forward today or if she would prefer to go to Chancery Court for contempt and have that witness brought in at a later date.
Forward.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure on the record.
Yeah,
I just want to give her that opportunity since she had requested the
Yeah.
2 subpoenas.
Okay, so Ms. Woodland, I understand your subpoenaed witness, Ms. Penny Jemison, RN, was subpoenaed and is not present. So board counsel has provided you an opportunity to get a continuance to sort of follow up on Ms. Tina to try to enforce it against Ms. Jemison. Is that something you want to do, or would you like to proceed with
I would
Stacy?
like to proceed.
Proceed, any other preliminary matters?
No, Your Honor.
We will proceed as follows. We'll begin with opening statements. Hear arguments from each side, allow for question, and at the conclusion of the presentation of both arguments, we'll have closing statements. So we'll begin now with an opening statement from each party, beginning with Ms. Salzman.
Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today for a hearing for the board panel on the complaint filed related to the nursing license of Mrs. Woodland. Mrs. Woodland was first licensed as an RN in Mississippi in 1986, and she has been a nurse practitioner since 2010.
2002.
I'm sorry,
Ms.
my notes are wrong. 2002. Check that. make sure.
Woodland. Thank you for that, but you have to let her finish her opening statement.
Okay.
No, it's fine. So maybe I can correct that. You've been a nurse practitioner in Mississippi since 2010. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Today you will hear evidence that she failed to provide a collaborating agreement upon a request by the board and was also unable to provide QA/QI documentations during a visit and audit by the board. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Woodland, now's
Yes,
your
ma'am.
opportunity to give your opening statement.
Yes, ma'am. When Mr. Wiley came to the prison, I want to say that was December of 21. And he came at a time when all of the administrative personnel have already left for the day. So my file was locked up. Since then, I've gotten my collaborating physician agreement, and that's kept in my office. But I couldn't provide him with any details, so that's why we're here.
Thank you. At this time, we'll begin with board counsel's case in chief, and then after she rests, then it'll be your opportunity. Ms. Salzman?
Thank you, Your Honor. The board calls Floyd Wiley. Could you state your name, county of residence, and place of employment for the record?
Floyd Wiley. I reside in Rankin County and I work here at the Mississippi Board of Nursing.
And how long have you worked at the Board of Nursing?
Over 12 years.
And during that time, have you participated in investigations that have resulted in the discipline of licensees?
Yes,
And is it part of your duties with the board to investigate complaints received related to individuals that have been licensed by this board to practice nursing in the state?
yes.
If you would, please turn to what's been marked as Exhibit B3, page 4, and identify that documentation.
License verification for Gwendolyn Woodland,
And what's that license number?
689882.
And does this show that she's been a nurse practitioner licensed in Mississippi since July 16, 2010?
Yes, that's correct.
And what's the current status of her license?
It is active.
You would turn to page 6 and identify that document, please.
License verification,
This is for Mrs. Woodland.
it is for Ms. Woodland, her RN,
And what license number is that?
689882.
And what is that license issue date?
November the 3rd, 1986.
And is the status of that still active?
Yes.
If you would, please turn to page 11 and identify that document, please. I'm sorry, go to 10, B5. Identify that document, please.
It is a notice of hearing.
And is that informing Ms. Woodland to be present on today's date?
Yes, that's correct.
And then if you would turn to the next page, page 11, please identify that document.
It is the complaint,
And who's the respondent listed on this complaint?
Ms. Woodland.
And would you tell us what charge is listed against Mrs. Woodland?
The charge is, charge 1, respondent violated Mississippi Code annotated 731529, and that respondent has negligently or willfully violated any order, rule, or regulation of the board pertaining to nursing practice or licensure. Namely, the APRN shall practice in a collaborative relationship with a Mississippi licensed physician whose practice is compatible with that of the APRN in violation of 30 Mississippi Administrative Code, Part 2840, R14C, and that each APRN shall participate in a formal quality assurance, quality improvement, which is QAQI program, which shall be maintained on site and shall be available for inspection by representatives of the board in violation of 30 Mississippi Administrative Code, Part 2840 R14D.
If you would, please tell us what additional facts are listed in that complaint in support of this charge.
Respondent was employed as a nurse practitioner with South Mississippi Correctional Institution in Leakesville, Mississippi, on or about August the 31st, 2021. A telephone interview was conducted with respondent, and she was asked to provide the board with a copy of her collaborating agreement, but she failed to provide on or about January the 13th, 2022, a site visit was conducted by the board. During the site visit, respondent was asked to provide a copy of her collaborating agreement and also asked to provide evidence of QAQI documents. At the time of the site visit, Dr. Ronald Woodall was listed as respondent's collaborating physician on her gateway. Respondent was unable to provide the board with either the collaborating agreement or the QAQI documents. On or about February the 9th, 2022, Dr. Woodall informed the board staff that he had not worked at the prison since December 1st, 2021, and was specifically South Mississippi Correctional Institution since December 1st, 2021.
Thank you. Did you have an opportunity to reach out to Mrs. Woodland in August of 2021 and conduct a telephone interview with her?
Yes, I did.
And what did that involve? What did you discuss on that phone call?
On the phone call, I recall discussing an allegation that was made against the licensee. And I specifically pointed out what the allegations were that were made against her. And I was trying to get her side of the story on the allegations that were alleged. She gave her side of the story on the allegations that were made against her.
And what was that allegation?
As far as the specifics, I don't recall exactly, but the bulk of it, it was essentially pertaining to the licensee was refusing to give medications to patients, refusing to allow patients to receive a second opinion from a physician, which in that sense would have been her collaborating physician. And then it also alleged that she did not have a collaborating physician at all.
Okay, so did you ask her at that time to provide a copy of her collaborating agreement with her collaborating physician?
Yes, I did.
And did she provide it in August of 2021 to you?
No, she did not.
What is the collaborating agreement?
Collaborating agreement is essentially a contract between the nurse practitioner and the collaborating physician, in which in Mississippi, our advanced practice, nurses have to have a collaborative agreement. But the long and short of it essentially lays out what the scope of practice is or what said individual will do at a particular practice site.
In
And I'll-
Mississippi, is a nurse practitioner required to have a collaborating agreement with the physician?
Yes,
And after you made that request on the telephone call, you stated that she didn't provide a copy of that collaborating agreement, is that correct?
that's correct. She didn't provide that.
And at the time of that phone interview, who did you expect was going to be the collaborating physician?
Dr. Woodall.
And why is that?
That's the physician that was listed in the nurse practitioner, Woodlands Gateway as a collaborating physician.
And after that time, around January of 2022, did you have an opportunity to do a site visit where Mrs. Woodland was employed?
Yes,
And could you tell us where she was employed?
she was employed at South Mississippi Correctional Institution.
As a nurse practitioner?
Yes,
And at the site visit in January of 2022, did you again request a copy of that collaborating agreement?
yes, I did.
Was she able to provide you with a copy during your site visit?
No, she did not.
Did you also ask for QA/QI documentation?
Yes, I did.
Was she able to provide a copy of QA/QI documentation at your site visit in January of 2022?
No.
What is QA/QI documents? What are those?
Quality assurance, quality improvement. It's basically something that's in the practice agreement to basically assure or help that patients receive quality care. And normally it's monthly logs and quarterly meetings that's documented and signed off on by the physician, collaborating physician, and the nurse practitioner.
At the time of your site visit in January of 2022, do you remember or know who Mrs. Woodland had listed then as her collaborator?
In 2022,
January, during the site visit, not the phone call, the site visit in January of 2022.
Dr. Van Cleve.
Okay, so let's turn to page 17, please.
What page?
17. Exhibit B7. Could you identify this document, please?
This respondent's renewal application.
What's the date? What year?
The date that I see is September the 3rd, 2020.
So this is her 2020 application to the MSBN for licensure.
Yes,
Okay, and if you go to page 20 of her application, who does she list as her collaborating physician at the time?
page 20.
It's towards the bottom of the page under practices.
Dr. Woodall.
Could you tell me when RNs and NPs renew their licenses in Mississippi and how often?
Renew their license on the even number years.
So this application that Mrs. Woodall filed in the fall of 2020 was for renewal of her license in calendar years 2021 and 2022.
Yes,
And then she would again have filed for renewal of her license again in the fall of 2022. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, so please turn to page 22 and identify that document, please.
It's a license renewal.
And what year is this renewal?
This is for 2022, actually November the 2nd, 2022.
And this is Mrs. Woodland's application.
Yes, it is.
And if you would turn to page, no, let's see, it was filed on 11/2/2022, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so if you would turn to page 25 and again, tell us who she lists as her collaborating physician on that application.
Dr. McCleve.
So I'm going to ask you now to turn back to page 15, which is Exhibit B6. And identify that document, please.
B6 is nurses information. Nurse practitioner Woodland.
And is this license and practice site information for Mrs. Woodland?
Yes, it is.
And where does it set, what does she have listed on this page as her practice site information? What facility?
South Mississippi Correctional Institution.
And is that currently shown as an approved site?
Yes,
And looking at the collaborating positions that are listed on page 16, could you please tell the panel who is listed as an approved collaborating position for respondent currently?
Dr. Charmaine McCleve.
And can you tell us the date that collaborator was approved as her collaborating position?
November the 7th, 2022.
And is that after the date she filed her 2022 application listing Dr. McLeave as her collaborator?
Yes,
And it shows the last date prior to that, that Mrs. Woodall had a collaborator. And could you tell us what that date is? Prior to the approval on 11/7/2022?
December the 31st, 2016.
So just so I'm clear, from December 31st, 2016 until November the 7th, 2022, Mrs. Woodall did not have an approved collaborator with the Board of Nursing.
Yes, that's correct.
And she submitted her most recent application to the board as Dr. McLeave being the collaborator on 11/2/2022.
Yes,
But the board didn't approve Dr. McLeave as collaborator until 11/7/2022. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And November the 7th, 2022 is the first time a collaborator had been approved by the board since December 31st, 2016.
Yes,
So Mrs. Woodland practiced for 6 years as an NP without an approved collaborator.
according to this, yes.
And on both of the two most recent applications, she lists collaborators on her application, when in fact they were not approved collaborators, correct?
Will you repeat that, please?
On both of the two most recent applications in 2022 and 2020 that we just discussed, she listed collaborators on her application, but they were not approved collaborators with this board. Is that correct?
Yes,
And your site visit was conducted in what month and year?
that was January 2022.
That was some 11, maybe 10, 11 months before Mrs. Woodall got an approved collaborator.
Yes,
So you first mentioned this to her in August of 21, correct?
yes,
You did a site visit in January of 22, correct?
yes,
And then she did not get an approved collaborator with the board until November the 7th of 2022.
yes.
If you would, please turn to page 27 and identify that document, please.
These are emails between myself and Dr. Woodall.
And what's the date of this email on page 27?
February the 9th, 2022.
And when did Dr. Woodall state that he no longer worked for SMCI?
Actually, that was on February the 9th, 2022.
And turn into page 29.
Excuse me. The last question, did you ask me the date?
The date of the email.
Okay,
Mhm. And then I asked you, when did he state in the email that he no longer worked at South Mississippi Correctional Institute?
that date was 12/1/2021.
And then if you look at page 29, is this still part of that same series of emails between you and Dr. Woodall?
Yes,
And what does this email state? What did he inform you when you asked for a copy of the collaborating agreement?
stated, he started in 2006. The collaborative agreement will be available from SMCI worksite and will be available from Penny Jemison.
But when you visited the site, you were not able to either be provided a copy of that collaborating agreement or the QA/QI documentation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Ms. Woodland, at this time, you may ask this witness questions if you have any for him.
Mr. Wiley first called me and said that there were accusations made against me from people over in Area 1. I wasn't sure if that was the patients, staff. He wasn't clear.
You can ask him that question.
Oh, my bad. So what I said to Mr. Wiley, I asked him, do I need an attorney? And he responded, if that's what you want to do. So then I said to Mr. Wiley, I've been at the prison for so many
Your Honor,
years.
and I'm
He-
sorry, I'm gonna have to object. It appears right now that maybe she's testifying instead of
Oh.
asking a question. So
Okay.
I just,
Yeah, the objection is sustained, and Ms. Woodland, just, frame that in the form of questions for him. If you want to ask.
It
him-
was really, it
You can ask him
was,
if, you can ask him to affirm or, is that correct? You can ask those questions of him. Just frame it in the form of a question.
can't think of any. Dr. McLeod?
I don't think Dr. McLean.
It's not my job. I don't think I'm allowed to do that. I do have one thing I would like to say.
I'm sorry,
Kept saying Ms. Woodall instead of Ms. Woodland. And
My
technically,
apologies.
since Dr. Woodall was my ex-husband, that would be me. So that makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
Oh,
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to correct the record to reflect if I have called the respondent Woodall instead of Woodland, my apologies, and I would like the record to be made corrected. Your Honor.
Motion granted. I mean, I'm sorry, do you have any objection to that? Do you have an objection to that, motion, Ms. Woodland? Right, the objection is granted. I'm sorry, the motion is granted. Oh, yes, so now Ms. Woodland, Ms. Woodland,
Yes, ma'am.
if you have questions for this witness, you can ask him.
Oh, ma'am.
Any questions from the board hearing panel for this witness? All right,
The board rests, Your Honor.
the board rests at this time, Ms. Woodland. So now is your opportunity to put on your case.
Yes, ma'am. I did submit copies to the board yesterday. And it's a collaborating agreement. And there were 4 copies of a mortality review. That's one form of our QA/QI. And we discuss patients who have expired. We look at their care to see if we did everything in our powers to do. So that's one form of our quality improvement. Another way that that's documented is through our chronic care, where there's listed outcomes. Depends on the, I'm a little nervous right now. But anyway, there are forms on this particular chronic care. It does talk about the goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and that is also a form of quality improvement. We also have impromptu, not regular, but we do have them where we do in-services with one another. Mostly it's the nurse practitioners. And we may discuss a treatment that we're not familiar with or medication that's new. But there is no form that we keep other than the one I told you about that I faxed to the board.
This time, Ms. Salzman may have some questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna try to get this right, Ms. Woodland. If you would just tell the board briefly your educational background. From
University. Iowa Wesleyan College, Mount Pleasant, Iowa, 1977. ESN.
when were you first licensed to be a nurse? What year?
In 1979 in Illinois.
And when were you first licensed as an NP? I know it was in another state.
12 of '02.
And then when were you first licensed as an NP in Mississippi?
In '03,
And how long, when did you begin employment with SMCI?
2010.
And are you still currently employed there?
I am.
And do you practice as a nurse practitioner there?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you perform medical assessments on patients?
Yes.
How long have you been, oh, you've already, sorry, we've already done that. So even though you do currently have an approved collaborator, why did you not have an approved collaborator from December 31st, 2016 until November 7th, 2022?
This is the first time I'm hearing about that.
But do you agree that Investigator Wiley called you and spoke to you in August of 2021? And
Yes,
at that
ma'am.
time, did he ask about your collaborating agreement?
I can't remember.
Do you recall him coming to the facility in January of
I do.
2022 to do a site visit?
Mhm.
And were you able to provide him with a copy of the collaborating agreement at
No,
that
ma'am.
time? Were you able to provide him with a copy of the QA/QI documentation at that time? And do you dispute that it wasn't until November the 7th, 2022 that you got an approved collaborator?
Oh, I
of Dr.
definitely
Miss
dispute
Lee?
that.
I noticed that you submitted a collaborating agreement that was marked as R1. It starts on page 37 of your packet. And it appears on page 38 that there was a collaborating agreement that was executed on December the 29th, 2021 with Dr. McLeave and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But you would agree with me that that is still after the time that the collaborating agreement was requested from
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Wiley, or Investigator Wiley, in August of 2021.
When he came there, I can't remember the circumstances other than why I did not get it back to him in a reasonable time. I did have surgery a couple of months later, so it could have just been all of the pain that I was in. I can't really recall why I didn't get it to him in a timely manner.
If I tell you the board's records indicate that from December 31st, 2016 till November the 7th, 2022, you practiced as a nurse practitioner without a collaborating physician, do you have any reason to dispute that?
I wasn't aware. I'm just hearing about this for the very first time. I mean,
Do you understand that as a nurse practitioner in the state of Mississippi, you do have to have a collaborating physician?
yes, I do know that.
And you understand they have to be approved by the board?
That I wasn't aware of until it was mentioned, but I mean, I do my submission, I submit everything, but when was I nobody has ever told me that it had to be approved by you guys.
And just, I have no further questions.
All right, at this time, the board hearing panel may have some questions for you. You need a brief recess? Or you ready?
I don't want to go out of turn.
Yes, yes, yes. If she wants to call you as a witness, she will be able to do so. But right now, the board is just.
So,
For being here. I just have a couple of questions. The first one just is a clarification. We were going through your history. I thought I saw that you were first licensed in Mississippi as a nurse practitioner in 2010, but I thought
No, I
heard you
was
say
not.
2003.
My bad. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
It said, I thought I heard you say that you had been an NP in Mississippi in 2003, but I thought the paperwork and the exhibits that we have say 2010, and you had agreed to that at the beginning of your testimony.
I don't remember agreeing to 2010. I became a nurse practitioner at SMCI in 2010, but I've been licensed in the state of Mississippi as an NP since March of 2003.
So I guess, can you briefly describe to me your collaborative practice over the past several years at this facility?
Dr. McCleve, well, it was Dr. Woodall, but whenever we had an issue or if there were things that we needed to discuss, we had him available. Same with Dr. McCleve, if there are questions, procedures, anything, medicines, I have her to go to talk about that. X-rays, EKGs, labs. I talked to her about that.
How often do you collaborate with Dr. McLeod? A week?
Oh, almost on a daily basis on, we talk about certain patients that we haven't been able to turn around, patients in the infirmary, patients looking for early release based on their current conditions. I discussed that with her.
And then just from the aspect of, did I understand your testimony to be that you didn't understand that the Board of Nursing needed to approve your collaborative physicians?
This first time I heard that. I've submitted it. I've, like Mr. Wally says, it's on my gateway. I've never gotten a letter from State Board of Nursing saying this physician, how was I supposed to do that? Other than putting it on gateway.
But the gateway doesn't show that you had an approved one until a little bit later, like that there was a lot of time lapse
Up
in there.
until
So-
2016. I'm sorry.
So that you can make sure that you can answer the whole thing. So from 2016 to 2022, it looked like there was not an approved collaborator on there. And so I guess my question is, do you understand that nurse practitioners, especially in the state of, the state that you're practicing in, have to be very familiar with the rules and regulations set forth by your regulatory agency?
I do.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Ms. Woodland. at
Yes,
this
ma'am.
time, You may call your witness.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. McCleve, how long have I been at SMCI?
Since 2010.
What would you say about my documentation? Because I know you do peer reviews.
I do peer reviews, monthly, annual, and your documentation is pretty good, probably better than mine most days. You know?
Do I come to you when I have questions or questions about a procedure or a lab? Do I
Definitely.
involve you?
Yes, I usually look at everybody's x-rays, and you do come to me with questions about patients and treatments and lab results.
QA, QI, do you have anything you can add on that?
I'm really not sure what to say about, I mean, just what we review
Other
and
than the
the
death
death review,
reviews,
and then the meetings where we go over some issues, and but other than that, that you already covered. No, I don't have anything else to add. Did I say something? I bet it's not related to a question.
Well, she can just ask you to say that.
Ask me about,
Well, yeah.
because I was there when they asked him to speak.
when I first started at SMCI, and it was known that I had to have a collaborating physician.
All right.
And Dr. Woodall was my collaborating physician from 2010, when I first started, up until he left in November or December of 2021. Is that correct?
When they when we first started working, he and I both started working at SMCI. I was present when the administration of Wexford, who was the then company there, came to him and told him that he would be responsible for the nurse practitioners and as their collaborating physician, and he agreed. I was there present at the time. He currently has Alzheimer's and is not able to testify himself, so that's as close you're gonna get to his collaboration. They never, I thought he had signed some agreements at that time with them that should have been given to y'all. But it was a corporate situation, so I'm not really sure what the corporation did with it.
Any additional questions for your witness, Ms. Woodland?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Salzman, any cross examination?
No, Your Honor.
Any questions from the board for this witness?
Thank you for coming. I just have a couple of questions just for clarification. So whenever you said your documentation is pretty good, is the documentation review the only part of the patient care and treatment and that you evaluate as you're
No.
evaluating and collaborating, Ms. Woodland?
We actually have exam rooms that are adjacent. They're next door to each other pretty much on a daily basis. I'm talking to her about patients or going over x-rays with her or something of that nature. So we collaborate pretty much daily, only if one of us is off.
At your own site every day with?
I'm off one day a week. Other than that, yes.
And then can you tell me how often you guys meet to walk through your formal QA/QI plan and what that consists of?
There's a monthly meeting with the nurses and us to go over plans and just charting and everything that the administration is concerned with at any rate, and we bring up our own issues with each other and with the nurses at that time.
Do you ever have a time that you and your NPs that you collaborate with that you meet to discuss specific projects?
It's more when I've only had a formal meeting a couple of times with them over the past, I worked as administrator from when Dr. Woodall left for about 2 months, and then Dr. Adebayo came in, was the administrator, and I've only been administrator now for a little over a month, and I've only had one meeting so far, so this time around. So I really haven't had any formal meetings much this time around yet.
But you've been her collaborator since 2022?
There was a time in the middle of that where Dr. Adebayo was the collaborator, but I was still, I'm there every day. I'm still collaborating with her and the other nurse practitioners on a daily basis. In fact, they usually come to me because I'm easier to talk to.
Okay.
But formally, I think he formally was a collaborator and he started in January of, was it 22?
No, 20.
23, because I started in November of 22.
Okay.
And he started in January of 23, and he left in January December this year, or last year.
So you weren't the collaborator for 2023?
Most of the time it was Dr. Adebayo, who has moved to Canada.
Okay. Thank you.
However, I do know that he was under the impression that he was formerly her advisor. In fact, they tell us when we I don't know if he signed something or not, though.
He did.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for this witness?
I have one additional question, Your Honor. Dr. McLeod, do you have Mrs. Woodland listed as a nurse practitioner that you collaborate with on your website with the Board of Medical Licensure?
I believe it's under that paperwork I left up to the administration, Ms. Jemison and was the one at that point in time. She's now been promoted. But I cannot say, since I did not do it personally, I cannot say it was actually. I left.
Is your license number 09153?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm gonna show you a document. Please tell me if you see whether you've listed Mrs. Woodland as a nurse practitioner on your gateway with the Board of Medical Licensure.
No, I did not, but that's probably my ignorance of paperwork.
Your Honor, I'm gonna ask that that be marked and entered into evidence as B11.
Any objection, Ms. Woodland, to the admission of this exhibit into today's record?
If I object, what is that gonna do?
It just gives you an opportunity to state what you believe to be a, legal-
I
When-
object, I
when was
think it was
this?
an oversight.
When was this? It doesn't have a date on it.
What do you mean filed? That's just a copy of what's
The
available to the public on your gateway under your license number.
Okay.
And your collaborator, the nurse practitioners that you typically collaborate would be listed there by you and your gateway.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not used to being in charge. Except,
Ms. Woodland, any objection to that document, or if you have one, to that being admitted into the record for today's hearing? No objection. All right, the exhibit is admitted into today's record. Any additional questions? Any additional testimony from Ms. Woodland? This time, we'll have closing statements, beginning with Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mississippi Code annotated 73-15-23 provides that all nurse practitioners must have collaborating physicians. And we have likewise promulgated regulations that mimic that statutory mandate. Mississippi Code annotated 73-15-29-2 provides that the board has the power to discipline the license of a nurse for violation of 73-15-29-1, which includes the power to discipline for a nurse's failure to comply with an order, rule, or regulation of this board. Today, you've heard evidence that Mrs. Woodland practiced as a nurse practitioner in this state without an approved collaborator for nearly 6 years. And she was unable to provide the board during its investigation on 2 different occasions with a copy of that collaborating agreement, even though the board requested it. She also could not provide the QA/QI documentation for an on-site inspection by the board. Because she did not have a approved collaborator, I would respectfully request the board consider all disciplinary actions available to it under 73-15-29-2. Thank you.
Ms. Woodland, now is your opportunity to give your closing statement.
Yes, ma'am. When Mr. Wiley called me and told me that who he was, the reason for the call, and there were allegations made against me. And I asked Mr. Wiley, do I need an attorney? And he responded, if that's what you want to do. So I said to Mr. Wiley, I've been at the prison for X a number of years. People have always made allegations against me. What is different? What is different that I'm getting a phone call? So anyway, when he came to visit the prison, it was again, I said after hours. the documents that he requested, the collaborating agreement and the QI or QA were locked up in a file cabinet. The administrative staff had already left for the day. I didn't keep a copy of that information, but since then I have. The allegations that I am not providing medications, I am not doing referrals, it's all not true. When I have always told my patients, if you are not satisfied with the answers that I give you, I have an MD that is over me. You are welcome to go to him and talk to him. I've always told my patients that. Another thing that I would like to add when it comes to QA and QI, I've been a nurse for 47 years. The one thing that DONs has drilled into my head, if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. I've heard that all the time. So my documentation, I think, includes things when it comes to chronic illnesses. If your pressure is this, you're not taking your medicines, why? I then tell my patients what's going to happen if you're not compliant. So this is all documented, and this is a form of QA and QI. All I have to say.
This concludes the hearing in case number 2018-1223 involving licensee Ms. Gwendolyn Woodland, license number R-689882 At this time, I'll entertain a motion from the board to go into closed session to determine whether grounds exist to go into executive session to deliberate on case number 2018-1223.
Motion?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposition? Hearing none, at this time, I'll entertain a motion from the board to actually go into executive session to deliberate on this case.
I make a motion, we go into executive session for deliberations on stated case number.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the board is now in executive session and will return with its decision in this matter. We are back on the record in case number 2018-1223. I will announce the board's decision. I'll ask that the board hearing panel state their names for the record.
Janie Clanton, RN.
Melissa King, nurse practitioner.
Thank you. The decision is as follows. The board finds the licensee, Ms. Gwendolyn Woodland, guilty as charged. The discipline imposed is a restricted license, and the restrictions are as follows. A formal reprimand will be issued by the board, a $500 fine, completion of APRN orientation offered by this board, the Board of Nursing APRN orientation course. And so the discipline is for you to complete that, a professional accountability course. And then for 12 months, you must submit quarterly reports to include QI documentation for 12 months after the order goes into effect. Any questions? You will receive a copy of this in the form of a written order, which is sort of detailing out what I just said. So, you know, the order will be consistent with the announcement. And you'll have the details before you, and there you'll have an opportunity to meet with your assigned compliance officer related to this discipline. You have an opportunity to ask questions then, but the gist of it is a formal reprimand, fine, completion of 2 courses, and for a year, 12 months, the submission of quarterly reports to include a QI documentation.
I can still work.
Yes, yes.
And the $500 is in.
Okay, so this order, once it goes into effect, once you receive a copy of this order in the mail, at the bottom it'll be dated, and it'll show the signature of the executive director's signature on there. So 90 days after you receive that order with that date on there, 90 days after that date is the time period you'll have for payment of that fine and completion of those 2 courses.
And another question. The courses is with Mississippi State Board of Nursing?
One is the APRN orientation course is offered by the board, and I understand, and I may be incorrect, so just follow up, that the course is offered twice a month. So you would, you know, your compliance officer should know there may be information available about this course and how to sign up for it on the board's website. You can take a look there. But that professional accountability course is not offered by the board, but by the compliance officer will help direct you how to access that course.
And their name be also on this this form I'm about to get, the compliance officer?
Not the actual individual that's assigned, but the position itself, like the board's compliance officer. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. You cut off some time, okay. Just- you said set up an hour and a half. Oh, my gosh. She said 30. I'm fine with that too, it doesn't matter. Okay, I don't wanna make y'all confused, you know,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, okay, so, okay. Before I call up the next matter on the docket, it's gonna be, case number 2023-0512. Before I call up that matter, I understand that we are now gonna break, for lunch. So, let's, break until 1 o'clock. And then, we'll return and begin with that, with case, 2023-0512. The board is in recess for lunch and we'll return at 1.